folks, and welcome to Center Lane. I'm Bruce Hitchin. Today I'm at the Trev Deeley exhibit in Burnaby, British Columbia. Now, the Trev Deeley name has become synonymous with motorcycles, and more specifically, Harley Davidsons in Canada. Trev Deeley was a racer, he was a collector, and he was a philanthropist. And this exhibit showcases the enormous Deeley collection. Please remember to like and subscribe to my channel. Now let's talk to Brent Cook, who is the director of the exhibit.
Fred Deeley Sr. left England where he had a bicycle store. And when he arrived in Vancouver, he decided to open another bicycle store, and he called it Fred Deeley the Cycle Man. So he opened that store in 1914. In 1917, he took on the dealership for BSA, British Motorcycles. And at the same time, Harley Davidson approached him. And the interesting thing about that is that at that time, there would have been 2 dealers in the United States. So Vancouver was the 3rd dealer in the entire Harley Davidson lineup. So their first international outlet was here in Vancouver at Deeley's, and Deeley held the contract for being Canada's distributor of Harley Davidson from 1917 to 2017. So 100 years this facility has handled Harley Davidson. So initially, his father, Fred Deeley Jr., was into cars. And so they had all British cars, Austins and various cars, and they would take motorcycles in on trade for the car. And Fred Deeley Jr. would tend to just sell them off as scrap metal. I mean, you got 50 cents a pound for them kind of thing. And Trev, his son, was very young in the day, decided he would squirrel away a few of these bikes as they went out the back door and just started saving them. And he started saving them just for himself primarily and keeping them in a warehouse away, and Dad never really noticed that they were missing. And then when Trev moved into the business with his dad, he kind of took over the motorcycle line of things. His father remained with the cars, and then Trev took motorcycles, and away it went. And ultimately, the motorcycles took over the business and cars faded off. So by about the late 70s, motorcycles were really in and going like mad, and Trev was a going concern. So he continued to build his own collection for a long, long time. And that collection amassed to about 265 motorcycles. So it's a sizable collection. It's probably the largest privately held collection in Canada. Trev Deeley had a warehouse out in Richmond, and he had all the bikes in a great big open warehouse. If you were a gearhead, you probably were really happy to see 300 motorcycles, but if you were just a casual visitor, it was like, oh my God, I gotta look at all of these. You know, so here we're able to keep the collection down to about 70 on display at any given time, and they're themed. So we tend to put the exhibition together with a theme in mind, and about 70 bikes. So it's a little bit more digestible. We have 263 machines. We have 57 brands. People expect us to be Harley-centric, but really only about 1/3 of the collection is Harley-Davidson. The rest is spread out. So we have a lot of bikes. We cover a lot of interest. And I think that's another thing that people find surprising is when they come in here, they've come to Trev Deeley Motorcycles expecting to see Harley-Davidsons. When they come in the exhibition, as you can see, it's a broad spectrum of machines. This is the room that we call the wheel room, and this is because this is done like a wheel. So here you have the central hub of the wheel, and where the motorcycles are sitting is the tire of that wheel. So as we go around the wheel room here, I'm showing you Indians from 1906 right around to the war, 1945. So all of these models of these Indians are all different. They all have different configurations of engines. They're all bona fide Indians. And yet there are bikes here that Indian owners probably have never seen, such as the Arrow, which is the yellow one here. Then we have the Indian Warrior, TT. This was Indians' last hurrah at trying to hold an audience by changing their motorcycle to appeal to a younger audience. It didn't work, and the company went bankrupt in 1953. That's an Indian Chief. This is the model that everybody thinks of as an Indian. It has the big sweeping fenders, fully covered front and back. That's a traditional Indian look. So here is an interesting thing here. This is an Indian military motorcycle, 1942. This is an American Harley Davidson, 1942. Both these bikes were built for the government under specs. So the contract was written by the government as to what the motorcycles had to have on them, how they had to perform, et cetera, et cetera. And each company built their version of that bike for the military. This is a Harley Davidson flat track, dirt track racer. This bike would go probably 100 to 110 miles an hour, has no brakes. This is sort of your typical Harley Davidson 1950s bike that everybody thinks of when they think of a big old Harley. This particular Harley Davidson has every accessory that you could put on it in that day. So all the trim, all the bag decorations, everything on this is stock, but it was all the bits and pieces you could put on it at the time. This bike, I would argue, is probably the rarest Harley Davidson around, because it was back at the time when Harley Davidson was owned by AMF Voigt. They were trying to decide whether to take on the Japanese motorcycles that were water cooled. So this was an experimental bike, and it was rumored that they were building it, and they denied it always. They always denied building this bike. And so when this bike was tested and road tracked, all that kind of thing, it was always at night. It was in a black unmarked trailer taken to the racetrack and run, never seen in public. The directors at the time opted eventually not to do that. So they stayed with air-cooled engines, didn't go water-cooled, and didn't do this at all. So this bike, this is not a gas tank at all. This is the air box for a radiator, which is in there. The fuel tank is in the back fender where the cap is. Completely different configuration totally than anything that they build then or now. So this bike is the only one outside of Milwaukee, and this was given to Trev Deeley as a gift when he was a board member on the Harley Davidson board. So this is a model of the first motorcycle ever made, 1885. As I was saying, it was really just a test bed to test a gasoline engine, which was all brand new to everybody, and a transmission that could change gears, because they wanted to put all of this in a car. The car came out in 1886, the year after this was done. So this proved to be successful. The first trip they took on it was 84 kilometers from one German town to another. And if you can imagine, there were no roads in those days, so this would have been on a cow path, a trail, something like that. But they rode it 84 or 87 kilometers. It worked, everything worked fine, and the next year the car came out. A very rare machine. This was built by a fellow in Germany for Mercedes, and we acquired it from Mercedes. So this is one of the favorite bikes in the collection for me, because this is one I searched for a long time to find a 1990 Fat Boy. So this is the Harley Davidson Fat Boy, made famous by our friend Arnie in the movie Terminator. And the trouble with this bike is simply everybody bought it, everybody loved it, everybody immediately had to customize it and change it in some degree to what they wanted. So most bikes you find today, they're this model, the pipes have been changed, something on it's been altered. They've gotten rid of the yellow line that was indicative of this machine. So to find one in stock condition that looks just like this, the one that Arnold rode in the movie was black, not gray, but that was the only difference. This is that exact model, and it's pretty cool. So this bike here that you're looking at is the Captain America bike, probably the most iconic bike ever. The movie somehow became a cult movie, and who knows why. This bike was the symbol of everything at the time. And it just is absolutely iconic. Everybody knows that bike. So I had to have one of those, so we finally found one. This is its mate. This is the Billy bike. This was for Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper could not ride a motorcycle, didn't have any interest in riding a motorcycle, so they had to build one that he could control. So they built him this version, which actually looks like a lot of bikes today. You don't see many of these running around anymore. We treat the motorcycles as works of art, more like jewelry. There's no scheduling booking times to come in here. There is no fee to come in here. This makes no business sense except the owners saying, it's our tribute back to you. They're so interested in people enjoying these motorcycles that it's really to the good of their heart that this is even here. It's fun, it's interesting to do, and I'm always looking for bikes that are going to raise the value of the entire collection. So looking for that rare bike that will add. They're rare, they're expensive. So yes, I'm definitely a motorcycle guy.